So I'm going to bring our next amazing speaker onto the stage, Katie. Um, it's a thrill to see you again. We met where Texas or something like that, or
Yeah, Texas.
Texas, and really a thrill to meet you. And so I loved your talk there about how anyone can be an API hacker and find flaws. So you're going to talk to us here today about finding your first vulnerability, right? So
Yep,
shall I put your slides on the stage, or are you?
please do.
All right. Is this all right? Very good. Take it away, please, Katie.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you all today. I'm going to be talking about how to find API bugs and really as a guide to your first submission. So, I'm not very good at hacking. I will be the first person to admit that. I am never going to be on stage with like James Kettle, right? That's not me. And that's because APIs don't really have really technical, really in-depth vulnerabilities. It's not, you can't create a little console application you could bring on stage at a conference and be like, wow, look at how cool I am. Honestly, API hacking is kind of for idiots, and I'm an idiot. So it's great. Just to give you some information about me, my name is Katie, aka Insider PhD. I'm a hacker and a YouTuber. I also work at Traceable in technical marketing. I specialize in API security. Now, I used to be a developer. So I used to work on like a CRM in Laravel and PHP. And I used to make APIs. I used to make a lot of API endpoints. I'd be implementing it. And now I break them. So if you do want to know more about API hacking, you can follow me there. Like this is 20 minutes, right? I can't tell you everything, but I can tell you as much as I can. Um, I have demos, tools, bugs, everything, but each of these is like an hour long. So there's a commitment associated with them. But let's talk about why I'm not like other hackers. So, I am not a really technical person necessarily. When I look at APIs, I'm often looking at the functionality. And when I teach students, how you actually get into API hacking, I tend to look at what's in front of you because API hacking is not necessarily like other types of hacking. So the why I did API hacking, well, one, I can read JSON. That is probably the biggest skill you need to do API hacking, reading. Once you've got that down, the rest of the API hacking, I promise, is a lot easier. You see these WAF bypasses. This one's by some dev. He has amazing visualizations he puts on Twitter, and the WAF bypasses. Oh, that's way too difficult. No, I'm not going to do APIs. I'm not going to do WAFs. I'm not going to do JavaScript. Because I want to focus more on the logic than the payloads. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about how developers still make little mistakes. They're not really big things, they're not like huge, they're little things. And hopefully, you'll see what this actually looks like. So, why are APIs good? Like, why do developers like them? Well, they're super common. They're used both in web apps and mobile apps. And those of you who already follow me will already know what this is. This is my little hacking iPhone. I bought it from CEX for like less than £100. Um, and the idea is that I hack on mobiles. I primarily hack iOS. There is new API technology, things like GraphQL, which really changes how APIs work, but doesn't actually fundamentally change what an API does per se. This to say is that once you understand, uh, a RESTful API, GraphQL is like a different syntax. It's not a brand new idea or way of doing things. Um, Generally, if you're talking about like in a bug bounty contest, like I work in, a lot of people are kind of scared of APIs, which make it really great for you as a hacker. They have a really large attack surface. There can be hundreds of endpoints. Um, Often APIs are generated by external tools, or the way they're developed is such that it's like not a lot of labor on the developer's part, which means that they end up being sloppy. A lot of APIs are really intimidating for people, especially if you've got hundreds of endpoints to test. And a lot of fixes end up on the client side, but not on the server side. So I'll use an example of that. The reason why I hack mobile apps is often a mobile app will use the exact same API as a web application will, but the web application will have some kind of client side logic before it goes to the API. And they're not assuming people on a mobile app are going to say, write a JavaScript payload for an XSS. So step one in hacking is pick the right target. Now, my advice for new hackers is to go for a large API attack surface, but not an enterprise, because enterprise can be super overwhelming, but more often it tends to be because enterprise software use um, things like Java rather than kind of other API types, and they lean towards like SOAP APIs and like older API designs. It can also be really overwhelming. You want hundreds of endpoints, not thousands. I really like Yahoo because it has a lot of functionality. Pretty much all of it is APIs. They've got the Yahoo Mail APIs. Tumblr is a really big monolithic API. What you don't want to do when you're first starting out and you want to find your first API vulnerability is you don't want to start with a small surface area. You want something where you can dive into niche features and go into, I always say go into the hamburger menus because that's full of really, really kind of features that may not have been tested yet. I really like having a mobile app and a desktop app. Like I said, I primarily focus on mobile apps. And that's just because with mobile apps, they tend to have less competition in a bug bounty idea. And again, if you do want to set up like a mobile device, iOS, fantastic. Android, oh my God, I do never want to touch Android apps. They are awful. So once you've picked your target, recon. A lot of people have like these really complicated tool setups. Like I see it on Twitter a lot. It's like, check out this one line of bash that I've created. And they'll have like subdomain finders and CVE scanners and fuzzers and different proxies, and they'll do Kaido AMBURP, and they'll have a vulnerability. And to be honest, I have never found any vulnerabilities with these complicated recon approaches. All the vulnerabilities I found have been pushing buttons. Don't overcomplicate things. You don't need AI. You just need to get into the application and start pressing buttons. Go into hamburger menus, do unexpected things, sometimes paying money for more access. Let's say like a premium subscription to something. And I promise you don't need any other tools other than Burp, or if you're, say, a developer, Postman. Again, don't overcomplicate things. Keep it simple because APIs are designed for you to interact with it. It's designed for you to be able to get in there and actually make requests. That's their whole design. Now, yes, you can find shadow APIs. Yes, you can find endpoints that nobody knows exist. Of course you can. But let's, first vulnerability, keep it simple. You can dive into that once you find your first vulnerability. So, reading JSON. Now, there's a few different ways to read JSON. The first one is you maybe have been fired in the furnace of being a developer, and therefore you can just read JSON. But I really like this tool here. This is called JSON Crack, and it essentially creates a like graph out of JSON. So it's super visual. It's really easy to understand what the structure of this JSON is. But I promise you, even if you just understand a little bit of JSON, it is going to be a huge benefit if you're API hacking. Because actually quite a lot of vulnerabilities are simply just in the JSON. It reveals sensitive information. It reveals, I had this little, I did one where it was like a quiz app and it sent you the answers to the quiz at the same time as the question. And it told you which one was correct. And that was literally a bug I found within literally minutes. For example. So yeah, this is JSON Crack. Sorry, I saw people in the chat. Yeah, this is called JSON Crack Francois' message is the right link here. But it's fantastic, especially if you're not necessarily a native JSON person. Then you just need a way of making requests. So whether or not that is, say, in RESTful API world or GraphQL API world, it doesn't really matter. What you're doing is you're looking at what's in front of you and thinking, how could I build this wrong? How could I get this API to do something unexpected? Now, there is a good advantage to learning something like GraphQL. So, in case you didn't know, GraphQL, the body here includes a specially formatted query, and it's very similar to SQL in the sense that it's a query and you can say what data you want back, but absolutely looks nothing like SQL, and knowing SQL does not help you. But that can be really helpful for attacking your GraphQL APIs, because again, it's very intimidating, and also it's in JSON, so you can put it in JSON crack and see it as a nice little visualizations, etc., etc. So once you're actually making requests, all you're going in there and going is saying, well, if I can get user with the ID of 1 and that shows me my account information, if I change the 1 to a 2 and it gives me someone else's account information, okay, now we're talking vulnerability. And that is all I do. I got to say, I've got YouTube subscribers, you got to get that coin, you got to get those YouTube sponsorships in. Most of my hacking is changing a 1 to a 2 or changing a 1 to a -1. I make very, very small changes to these requests. And I'm just fiddling with it, seeing what I can make things do. So the only tool I use in my hacking is Burp. Genuinely, I don't tend to use any other tools. And in fact, I use the community edition now because I was going to make this video and it was going to be like, how long does it take Katie to be able to afford Burp Pro? And it took me a single vulnerability. So now I just use community edition because I want to prove my superiority and that I don't need to pay money to be good at hacking. But I use this, you can see the colors here. This is something called PwnFox, and it basically colors in the tabs in Burp depending on what color they are in Firefox. I love it. It's a fantastic tool. Now, if you have a really complex API, note-taking will give you a sense of control because, and you can kind of do it by the exact kind of thing you've tested here and whether or not it's vulnerable or not. Oh, somebody has just asked for extensions for Burp and API testing. None, just Burp. PwnFox, just Burp. That's all you need. But yeah, so notes can help you. I personally don't take a lot of notes. I take a lot of notes on things that I'm reading and articles and what other people are doing. But I don't necessarily take notes like this. My note taking is very much a single notepad document that has a list of endpoints in it that I think I should investigate further. So if you're thinking, what do I test for? These are the 4 issues I suggest you always test for. And these are 4 issues that no matter what API I'm targeting, I can usually guarantee that given enough time, I'll find one of these. IDORs, access control, bolas, cross-tenant, whatever you want to call them, things where you can do things to other people's resources, those, fantastic. Find them in basically every bug bounty program I participate in. Mass assignment, being able to say provide a password in an API request rather than go through a password reset functionality. Again, very, very common, especially when you've got bindings and you're looking at enterprise APIs. Information disclosure, it is the read it. Is it sensitive? Yes, it's sensitive. Great, report it. That really just takes time and for you to go through a lot of API endpoints. To be honest, API hacking, it's kind of like the hacking of your resilience more than anything else. And business logic errors, these are the bugs that I find the most. This is why I love hacking, because I love going into like the complex, like how does this API work and how can I break it? How does this go with a whatever, like a this is the payment flow. How do we skip over the payment part? Now, for access control, this is my essential how I test for it. So I make 3 accounts, some kind of admin, if I can, a regular user, and another regular user. If you can't find if you don't have access to create an admin account, then just ignore that part and make 2 users. What you're going to do is you're going to go through and understand how the permission system works. Now, again, if it's something where you have like tenants and you have admins and you have the ability to add like permissions to certain users, then okay, the like this is going to be far more relevant. Otherwise, you may just have a regular user can edit their profile, a page user can create posts, but a basic user can't. Now, I really like Archangel D-Day's way of describing this, where he says he goes through an application and looks for no's. He looks where he can't do something and then tries that. Now, the way I do this is that I will use burp, I will use burp repeater, I will repeat user one's, like say, I'll like do something on my first account, I'll go into burp, I'll change it so I'm logged into account 2 and see whether or not one's request still works. I've got a lot of videos on this, by the way, that go into like how this works in way more detail. So I recommend watching those. Again, this is high level overview, not in depth how to actually like do this, but access control definitely. When you're looking at mass assignment, what you want to do is you want to make a request. So in this case, you can see I've made a GET request to API deliveries, and it sent me some information back. It sent me an ID, a created at, an updated at, and a user ID. Now, when I do the put side of this, so you think about CRUD functionality, so we've done our read, our update, we shouldn't really be able to change the created at or updated at timestamps, right? Like that should be controlled by the database, not by the user. This is where you then go and test whether or not that is actually the case. And user ID is a big one. So here I've changed my user ID from 7 to user ID 1, and I've actually been able to take this like specific delivery and move it to a different user. Information disclosure, read the JSON. Just read it. Is it sensitive? Like, if yes, report it. GDPR can be a really great thing to be very familiar with because a lot of organizations still are struggling to get their arms around GDPR. But fundamentally, just read what's in front of you. Business logic errors. Now, this is the difficult ones to find because I cannot give you any advice for finding them. Poke stuff and see what happens. My kind of approach for dealing with business logic errors is that I will walk through the features of an API and basically try and skip over steps. So I'll go through the checkout, but skip the card details. I might have an order that I've cancelled while it's out for delivery, or I will have, conflicting rules. And that can often help, but this is really, really specific. The good thing about it being really, really specific, though, is that it's really hard for people to find them. So again, if you're in a bug bounty context, where you're trying to find unique issues that no one's ever found before, these often can be really great places to start. Input sanitization, really common in mobile apps. Again, check for the usual suspects, cross-site scripting. Even if you're doing it on like a mobile app, often you'll see the result of cross-site scripting on the main web application. And I've seen some really cool effects where you've been able to actually go really deep into XSS. If you ever see like an ampersand, though, it's not vulnerable. Please stop testing it. It's a waste of time. From all of this, I'm never going to be on this list. I'm never going to be on the top web hacking techniques of 2024, 2025, 2035, always the bridesmaid, never the bride. But I promise that this kind of API hacking, this kind of walking through issues is probably easier than you think it would be. Um, it's a lot easier to kind of just poke things and see if it works or not. It's a lot easier to sit there and change a 1 to a 2. It's a lot easier to go, well, do I really need to pay? Um, and you know what? Maybe I'll never be on the list. I've accepted it at this point. I'm never going to be on the list. I'm not a massive genius, but you know what? Who cares? Because I've got bugs anyway. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right.
Hey, Katie, great talk. Don't stray away from applying to those advanced hacking techniques. Changing 1 to 2s in APIs by Katie Paxton-Fear. It's a winner.
Yeah, exactly. Then my advice, just poke it and see if it works.
Yeah.
Like I promise, I think a lot of people overcomplicate API hacking because they think it's something new and different and cool. And it's like the API hackers are sitting there, like changing a 1 to a 2 and going, yes, $1,000. That'll pay the rent this month.
Totally, yeah. I've said I like getting into APIs could be a great first step into hacking because it does have that simple side of it. Once you understand web requests, intercepting traffic, using Burp Suite Community Edition, bless your soul for being, that brave to take a step back from the pro.
Well, I actually am based quite near Portsmouth. Like I live quite close to them, and I've actually visited their offices. But shockingly enough, sitting there camping outside their office, going, "Please give me Pro," doesn't actually work, and so you're better off actually using Community. And also, just from YouTube, a lot of people will assume that, oh yeah, the best hackers just have so much more money and resources. And that's true to an extent. Like there certainly are hackers that use like data sources that cost so much money that they are not possible for a lot of other people in the community. But honestly, something like API hacking, you really don't need it. You really don't. And I want to know that people who are actually like starting their hacking journey realize that they can too, even if they're in somewhere like India and that they don't have like a good salary.
Well, I have to say this is you're getting a ton of love in the chat. I don't know if you've been following this, Katie, but really amazing presentation. People are really enjoying it. There's definitely some fun ones. I want to make sure folks know how to follow your YouTube channel is amazing, and for everyone that isn't yet following Katie, you need to, right? There is really no better content out there. This is really fantastic stuff. Let's see what there weren't actually a ton of questions. Mostly people just loving the content that you're putting out there. But there was definitely some things like here. How about this one from Pratamesh? Like I think you've touched on it, right? Like the whole don't overthink it, right? Even like simple things can reveal flaws.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started doing bug bounty hunting, I had no idea what I was doing. I often say this to like even my in-person students. It's like if you know what burp is, you know more about hacking than I did when I found my first vulnerability. I knew absolutely nothing. Like I cannot get across how unqualified I was. I'd never seen a request. I'd built APIs, sure, but when you're building them, it's a very different perspective to when you're looking on the outside. But I think that gave me an advantage slightly because I think a lot of people are like, I'm going to get into bug bounty hunting and I'm going to follow all these amazing bug bounty hunters. I'm going to follow Nahamsec. I'm going to follow Stirk. I'm going to follow James Kettle. I'm going to be a hacker. And they kind of put themselves in this weird position where like they almost convince themselves that, hey, this is not a reachable goal. Now, I kind of fell into bug bounty hunting because I went to one of these HackerOne events. I didn't really know what it was. I just applied for it. And I didn't really know what to expect. And I think that mindset of, I didn't really have that kind of build-up of bug bounty hunting and the idea of it, and like putting other hackers on a pedestal. I kind of went in with no knowledge of what it was even about. Or I knew a little bit, but not that much. I knew the vague concept. I'd never done any actual hacking before. And I think that perspective of being like, you know what, this is possible, actually was huge for me to be able to like not necessarily put myself in a position where I'm like, oh, I'm too dumb to do this, or I'm not good enough. It was very much, I'm going to give this a go. This sounds fun.
It is intimidating, right? But I think what you're sharing here is just dive right in. You actually can make a lot more progress than you might think. We definitely saw some specific questions around how you go about testing, especially on mobile, right?
Yeah.
Are you proxying? Like, how are you doing that?
Okay, so this is dependent on whether or not you use Android or iOS. Now, I use iOS. If you're doing it on Android, you can use the Android emulator. The best way I've seen is using something called Genymotion. I have a video on YouTube about how to do it, though I don't think it works with the latest versions of Android anymore. But I don't really hack Android apps. So I'll give you the iOS answer. So I have an iPhone 13? No, it can't be a 13. I think it might be an 8 or a 10 or something. I think it's a 10. So I have an iPhone. It is not on the latest version of iOS. It's on the latest version that's jailbreakable. So you need to be able to jailbreak your device. There's a great website called canijailbreak.com that tells you exactly if you can do that or not. Now, I don't recommend doing this to your actual phone, but you're going to jailbreak it, install something called SSL kill switch, and that will completely disable SSL pinning on your device. It makes it very insecure. Like, do not do this on your actual phone. But you can then just proxy all your traffic through Burp like normal. And then you can often, like a lot of bug bounty programs will provide test flight apps as well, which aren't doing that, has like the cert pinning turned off. But yeah, so I'm essentially proxying all my traffic from my phone to Burp on my computer by just hosting it on the 192.168 IP address. Again, I have like tutorials on how to do this. But once you actually get like all the traffic proxying, it is exactly the same as any other web application. Then you go in there, you change 1s to 2s, you can type in your cross-site scripting payloads, you can see whether or not maybe you can set a payload on the mobile app and then view it on a desktop app. It depends on what you're exactly hacking. But you do need to jailbreak for iOS. On the other side, it's a lot easier than on Android, because on Android, you have to use Frida to patch the APKs.
And that's all right. That's how you go at it. Thank you for that. Let's see what else we got here. Did you have a question? Which one? This one here? Oh, there you go. Burp or Zap? Is this like a religious question?
So I use Burp. It's because it is the first one I learned. When I went to the HackerOne event, they set us up with Burp, and I was like, great. As kind of like Manchester Pride, though, Burp is also based in Manchester, and we got to support local businesses. But there's no real difference, to be honest, between Burp or Zap. Like, the Burp interface, I think, is easier to use than Zap. So it's my preference, but you certainly can use Zap. There is no reason why you couldn't. And I know Zap also has a lot of like testing suites in it, and automated tests. So if you did want to go for that, potentially Zap might be a better choice.
Got it. Fantastic. This chat window is just loaded with a ton of love for you, right? People really appreciate this fantastic content that you're putting out there, Katie, and we're really grateful to have you here. It's too bad we can't keep going. We're actually I imagine we could do this conversation for another hour or so. But Katie, thank you so much. I know it's late in the day out there in Manchester, but really appreciate it. This has been a fantastic session. A lot of people asking for, is this recorded? Can we get access to it? Answer is yes. So if you want to come back and replay this at 0.5 speed to capture every nuance of Katie's talk, you can definitely do that. But again, thanks so much, Katie. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, and I hope everybody listening has a great rest of the conference.
Thank you so much.